I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm not looking for anything other than I want people to be aware. I'm looking for awareness of a problem that's not been resolved. For long as people are still in pain as a result of a very, very evil upbringing forced on them, there's nothing that's going to benefit them in this world until they can get over it, until people understand.
Wow. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming and joining us again to spend some time with Lester and Agnes and hear stories. I would like to throw right away over to Agnes to just kind of go over, I guess, reiterate what happened in our last week's session and, have Lester share some more stories with us. So, Agnes.
Thank you, SA. Thank you again for being here with us. Thank you to my dad for being so open about your experiences. I know that when we listen to stories like this, we listen to lived experience. There's a lot to learn for both Indigenous and non-Indigenous. And, there's recommendations and things that we can hear throughout the stories on how we can learn more about ourselves, our family, our communities, and how we can do better. So I know that, Dad, you've talked a lot about some of the experiences you had, the different residential schools you went to. You shared some really heartbreaking moments, that you had in those schools, the day that you were taken. Looking back at what you've already shared, is there anything else that you'd like to touch on or give us a clearer picture of, experiences that you shared with us already?
Yeah, there's a few things that not so much that I left out. It's just a matter of my memory being stirred by what I've already discussed with you and what you've inquired about. And some of the things that I may have missed out on is what I said earlier. Uh, what really, one of the things that really disturbed me, and was disturbing because I was feeling it as well, and it's something that was shared quietly. We never spoke, but at nighttime, during the day we play and everything else, our minds are not on what happened to us, why we're there, or any of that. We never talked about it too much. Very little, we're just certain individuals that talk about how they were grabbed and everything else. Not too much of that, but at nighttime, you could pretty well identify by the crying who it was, who was hurting. And it was at times I thought it'd be so nice to just get up and go over there and just rub my brother on the head because he's crying and need comforting. I don't mean my blood brother because we were like brothers, all of us. And the dormitories, you could hear, like in one hallway, there was 4 dormitories. There was 8 of us in each dorm. Then there was the big dorm. Well, you could hear it. And even when in the big dorm, when you hear the little ones crying, there was the littler guys in the big dorm. They were crying so bad. It's almost like they were hurt physically, and they're crying for their mom to soothe them. That's what it sounded like, and that's how I interpreted it. That's how I felt, and I cried with them because it affected me. Uh, I don't know how to explain it for people to understand that the harshest thing that hurt the most, was the very idea of being removed from those who really did, and I don't use the word much, but really did love you. They didn't talk of it, but they lived it. That's what hurt. See, a lot of people can say, well, uh, love is necessary, love is universal, love is this, love is that. Well, I never knew love expressed. I didn't understand it, but I sure knew it when it was lived. I sure missed it. The old people, my mom, late mom, your grandma Aggie, uh, on and on. So that's what I felt when I heard them cry. I used to think, what did they experience? What hurt them so bad? That's what made me want to get up and just go and soothe them, put my hand in their head. I came so close sometimes to doing it, but we'd always be interrupted. There's me and another young man who was in there. He's a young Indian. We talked about that. He was next bed to me. And you know what he said was so wonderful and beautiful, I remember to this day. He said, I wish I could go and make them all happy right now. Very simple. Not so much I'd want to hear them crying. He knew, he felt it too. He cried as well. That's what he said. Isn't that wonderful? Comes from about an 8-year-old wanting to fix everybody because they heard it. Those are the kind of things that, to me, that the dynamics of it, it's just, it goes deep and it goes down to emotional. And that's the hardest thing for me to handle. The result of it was when, long after boarding school, I still had it within me. It was almost like a hatred. That's what came out of it. I did not trust the white man. Never. I just couldn't trust. It took a long time before I realized the color of the skin didn't matter. It took me a long time. I didn't trust any white man at all. And after a while, when I started to realize there's some good people in this world, regardless of their background, their racial origin, or anything like that. It took me a long time in my life. I would say I was in my 20s before I could really trust. And not a trust that I have to express. I trust you. No, it's just something that came to me that was missing. It helped me. It relieved so much within me. I started to realize, yes, it may have been white priests, white nuns that oppressed us, hurt us, harmed us, disoriented us mentally. But in all of it, there were so many good people, and I realized, no, I can't be judgmental. But it took many years, I'd say, I was in my 20s before I realized, you got to quit this. The grudges are going to kill you, because I bore a grudge. Straight up, I could not trust white people. When that term honky happened, I used that term fiercely. I don't regret it to this day, but I feel bad for doing it. I'm not sure to apologize to everybody for it. I want you to understand what brought it inside of me to dislike white people, which is no longer there. I don't have to walk down the street, hug them, and say, I care now. Hug them or kiss them. No, I want them to know. I want them to know what caused it. What caused me to get to the point of hatred. It took me till I was into my 20s to realize that hatred is destroying me. I could see that. Oh, I could see it in pretty well everybody I knew that was in there. Because when we ended up beating each other from the boarding school experience, beating each other in a provincial jail, I told me right there, there's something wrong here. There's something wrong with all of us. Not that it's our fault, but that's where the hatred carried on. And then there's times we were relieved, even in jail, we used to laugh. And for example, one of the brothers, I met him, we were on the same block. We're on B block, Fort Saskatchewan jail in Alberta. And when he got out for yard, he said something so wonderful, and we all laughed. He said, remember when we used to watch these movies? They'd get us movies and we could watch. And said, some of us, he was always with, we had to turn our back to the screen because we were bad guys. There's usually about 8 of us. We were out to be peeking, we get slapped. The other kids are laughing, watching the show. Now, he said, do you remember Howse? Those movie we watched when the cavalry came in to run off those bad Indians, you used to clap for the cavalry. I thought about, and that's how it was. Well, it wasn't me, he was joking. But you could hear everyone, when the Indians were being killed and everything, all these little Indian boys and girls, yeah, good for the white man, cavalry coming to kill these bad Indians. That has an impression on you. It does. Not so much for myself. It did for a while. I thought, Jesus, we ain't worth much. You know? And that has an effect on you. Now, later on when I studied their purpose of these movies, Hollywood was used for that purpose as well. It's not so much to destroy the image of the Indian, but to mislead people into believing something that was not true. It's the same as some people react now, who, I can't say they're hate mongers or anything like that. I can't say that. But they are ignorant people, not stupid. They're ignorant. They're ignoring what I have to say. They're ignoring what other people have experienced and have to say in relation to this particular part of our life, the upbringing we experienced in those children prisons. That's what I call them because that's how I perceive them to be. So, again, I want people to know that the hardest thing to handle was the emotional part. Even when I was beaten, I used to think, and this sounds crazy, but I used to think, beat me all you want, just quit beating all those other little ones. I'll say this. It hurts so bad to see little kids beaten, and you could do nothing about it. If you did, you were beaten as well. I wasn't afraid of the beatings. Like I said, I wanted to take the beatings for them. Sounds strange. And there's nobody there that I know of that have said, he deserved it, or she deserved it. There was none of that. We were all under the gun. That's one thing that I think made us solid, made us able to survive it. We had each other. That's all we had. And that's beyond even thinking about it. That's why I say today, those were my brothers and sisters in that institution. They stole my little sister. She was 3 years old on her own in an institute. My other sisters who were with her, they outgrew that institute and they were removed. So she was on her own. I used to cry for her. I used to want to see her so bad, and it just hurt to think she's all on her own in one of those institutions. It used to hurt me at night, and I'd cry because I wanted to just know that she's all right. It took many years before. It took actually, in actuality, the institute I was in, I was on my last year there. I was close to 15 years old where they can no longer hold you legally. So an incident happened whereby one of the priests made a mistake and attacked me. He attempted to rape me in what they call a sacristy, which is supposed to be a holy of holy places within the church. Carrying the sacred chalice after he drank his wine and everything else, and I served that mass. He attempted to rape me. It didn't work. Something within me told me, fight. This man was close to 300 pounds. He was also what they refer to as Father Confessor, the one that we'd have to go to once a week and confess our sins. What can you do wrong in an institute where they're always watching you and you know what you're up against? There's nothing you can do wrong other than talk when you're in line and pull you out of line and beat you. That's the kind of institution and mentality that we had to put up with. Now, going back on a lot of it, what I perceive today, and you know, I have to agree with this Royal Commission of whatever, inquiry into, you know, boarding school and all that stuff. Well, as much as I don't like the format where the system is in control of it, and they decide, like up here now, they're finding in these boarding schools, they're finding dead children that were never reported, or even, they might have been killed. Who knows? They're finding them all over. Now, I did not experience that. I didn't see it. But there was one incident where it really disturbed me. I thought of it for a long time. We were called to the girls' side. It's nighttime now. The girls were on one side. You could oversee where the nuns gather, their own private space outside. So I remember, I won't mention her name. She called us, one of the bigger sisters. We ran into the girls' part, which we were never allowed. There's no nuns. They were all gone. And we looked down. It was a high place, so I had to get pushed up and look down. And we were each taking turns looking down. These nuns were in the middle of the night. They had candles. And they're going out with a little box. One of the older girls, she said right away, I think that's a baby. Because there were some babies in there. You see in some movies, but it's real, where people take a baby that they don't want, they leave it on the steps of the church. That happened twice when I was in that institute, the first one. Babies were left with those nuns. Now, what one of them said was, I think there's a kid in there. I think there's one of those babies in there. Well, I don't know. I can't say. I won't accuse, but I'll say this. I saw it. And others seen it. Now, today the church, they are responsible, and the government. The government has a hold on people, and the church has a hold on people. It still does. Some of the people that I went to boarding school with, they still believe in the concept of a savior, and they still believe all that they were told. I don't advertise what it is I've come to know, and I don't even use the word belief. I talk about what I know, because I look at a lot of people who believe in things that harmed us Indian boys and girls. They harmed us with their religion. So I'm sorry, I could never believe in any God that condones what happened to us. The beatings, everything. And the hardest thing also, one of the hardest things was the mental part of it. We knew it's all wrong, even what they were saying. And when we talk about it, we be very careful what we're saying and what they hear, what we're talking about. Because we knew there were, I can say today, we knew there were somewhat sick people. We knew that they were not our family. We knew that they didn't care. And we knew that totally when we see them beat on the ones that are smaller than us. And we even be held back with hugging them and trying to condole them.
Even when you talk about like the brotherhood that you guys had, I remember you saying that, amongst you young men, that there was a code to never allow each other to be alone, especially with
Yes.
and that you guys would always watch out for each other in that way and make sure that the younger and smaller ones weren't left alone. And I know you talked about another bigger guy who really helped look out for you too.
Yep, that's how it was. It just, I think back on it now, and it was so wonderful to see one of the big brothers step in when a little boy was being beaten. I was a medium boy then. They classified us that way. And I so wanted to jump in and grab that priest by the throat, tear his throat out. I'm serious. But I was so happy when I seen one of the big boys step in, and he was big. He grabbed that priest and threw him across the room. That little guy just crawled back into line. So that priest knew. That's the first time I seen that kind of resistance. And I mean a resistance. So when that priest saw that, I think he got worried. He wasn't very tall, that priest, but he was mean. We often called him the sadist. He just loved beating on people, especially those who wet the bed. It's almost like they were less than human for peeing the bed. And yet it was them that were the cause of it, and I know it. So, the harshness and all of this, it brought us closer together. It brought us closer together. as soon as they saw, or I don't even want to name him, but as soon as they saw him step in, that was so encouraging. It was. So when that priest attempted to rape me, I kicked and kicked and kicked. He couldn't do it, and he started to bleed. I got away. I ran outside, sat outside until a regular mass was being said and the boys were coming down the hall. I served the early mass where there's nobody. And the regular mass come, I got up and I just jumped in line. Went with it. Nothing was ever said about it again until I brought it up with that director and told him what's going on. Not just what happened to me, but I know that that same priest was doing it to two of the younger boys. They used to turn red-faced when they came out of his room, or the priest section. They hung their heads, and their pockets were full of candies. And they came to us. And I know that they had a shame in them. We know what was going on. We didn't reject it, we took them in. In other words, we let them sit with us. We know what was going on. We didn't talk about it. We didn't have. All they needed was acceptance back with us. They were forced into that section where the priests were. They were forced in there, taken in by hand by force. And whatever transpired, it shamed them. Even as little kids, they were shamed. Imagine that. Imagine that. And you're going through it with them. Because if you don't feel nothing, you're just as bad as that priest. You know, that's the way I think of it when I think back. But there's nobody that I know of that did not sympathize with those two that we know for sure were being raped. So again, when you're that small, but you have this knowledge, it's tormenting because you don't know how to stop it. Now today they're talking about it openly, which is wonderful. But the part that stirs me is when I hear some of the experiences that these people have gone through. They're right on target. They're not lying. And it burns me, and it really burns me when I hear comments such as, oh, well, they received a good education. I think that can't be all that bad. That's what just burns me. I don't want to hate that individual. I want to sit them down and make them listen to the experiences that we had, just as we're doing here now.
Lester,
say
can I
this.
ask you a question?
Yes.
I know this is probably going to be a little bit loaded, but why do you think people have such a hard time, and I'll call it reconciling with this reality that they didn't directly experience but benefit from? Like, I know that's probably the answer unto itself, but what's your opinion on that? Why do you think people don't want to hear it?
You mean the GP, general public?
Yeah.
Well, to begin with, I look at it this way, and I've thought about that very thing. See, where they can wash their hands of it because a lot of them are saying this, well, that's the government's fault and their church. They don't realize they, as a citizen, identifying as a United States citizen or Canadian citizen, they're responsible. Also, where the church is concerned, they talk about love, the love of Jesus, the love of God, the love of everything else, but we didn't receive any of that. So the point of it is where they haven't experienced any of it. They're just hearing it in what they consider to be secondhand. What is the other? And some of them even said it. Well, we'd like to hear what those priests have to say about this. I punched a guy in the face over that very thing when I was younger. He wanted to know. He'd never experienced that. He was a friend of mine. Or it ended up he wasn't a friend of mine until years later. He didn't have to apologize. He knew after a while. He knew. But not everybody's going to turn like him and say, well, I understand now. Not everybody is. And the reason being is because they're so far removed from that reality that they've never experienced. And to them, to me, it's just like some people go and watch a movie and it's all over. Oh yeah, if you share something with them. So I just quit doing that because nobody cared. Nobody gave a damn. It's just so interesting. They couldn't relate to it because they didn't have to ever live like that. There is no sympathy, apathy. Now, if you look at it, when I say apathy, uh, I'm sorry, the wrong word. These people are pathetic. They are. Not us, the victims. No, it's those people where I know that we would never be able to make them understand. I knew that. And when this commission of inquiries happened and I hear all these testimonies, I still thought about it. But, people won't even believe them for what they said, the atrocities that they pointed out. And some of them experienced murder. The old man that passed things on to me was an old Dakota. When he talked about it, he said 1 in 10, his time. He was in those boarding schools. He was born in late 20s. He said when he experienced that, he said 1 out of 10 kids, because they didn't learn English within 1 month, they received a beating, and he saw children die in front of him. So did others. Beaten because they could not speak English within one month. So he didn't dwell on that, but I thought we had it hard. When he talked about it, it was worse. They saw death, children. So where, if you bring that to the world, uh, like we're doing now, I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm not looking for anything other than I want people to be aware. I'm looking for awareness of a problem that's not been resolved. For long as people are still in pain as a result of a very, very evil upbringing forced on them, there's nothing that's going to benefit them in this world until they can get over it, until people understand. Like I said, I don't want anybody to come to you, oh, sorry about that, big hug and everything like. No, that's not necessary. Just to understand that this cannot happen anymore. It cannot go on. Now today, when I look back in particularly at that boys' home, for whatever reason, it shut down, and it was a brand new home in the 50s. Now it was closed. It is closed today. Where these priests that were all part of that perversion and that meanness, they were sent to California. That's where their head house was, the Salesian order. So they were shipped out. If there's complaints about them, they were shipped out. There wasn't only me. I know there was 2 others that stood up for those little guys that were being raped. They tried to bring it to the attention of the director. The only comment I got from him, or they got the same comment. It's so hard to keep track of everything because there's so many of you. He didn't once even mention what we presented to him, that the priest attempted, Father Confessor attempted to rape me, and he's raped 2 young guys that we know. We know what he's doing. He didn't want to hear it. His response was, it might as well been, here, have a cookie, see you later. See, where it's hard to explain this. They're unfeeling. And I wonder when we talk about this, and even at that time when this is going on, how many people gave a damn? How many really cared of what we're going through? And once a month when they used to have these spaghetti dinners and bring out all the rich guys from around town, from Healy Ford, Old Man Healy, and all these big business and Bateman grocery store chain, they used to come in. And there's times I wanted to go. I thought, I wonder how these guys are. I wonder if they'd listen to me and these other guys that we talk together. We should talk to these guys. Maybe they'll do something about it. We thought, well, these rich guys, they'll be able to help. They didn't care. They didn't give a damn. They came there to support and give monies to that institute to further do what they're doing. So a lot of times the support wasn't just government. The government got money for those of us who were under their wardship, those of us who were stolen. Some of the white boys that came in, they were taken away, and it was recommended that they be put in there because they're unmanageable. But they still suffered the same as us. You know, the difference was we were stolen. They weren't. They were put in there with the parents agreeing for a period of time till they straighten out. Well, I don't begrudge them. A lot of them were treated well. But they also identified with us. Not one of them in any way considered us worse off than them or them worse off than us. No, we suffered equally. And I know with those white boys, some of them, they cried at night as well. They cried the same as we did. There weren't many of them. So that's one thing that helped me to accept that the white man is not every one of the white people are evil. And I thought back on these few white boys that were in there. They were like brothers as well. Ran into a couple of them later when I got out. Oh, we had a lot of fun. But the point of it is that hatred was still in me. And we talked about it. A lot of the guys said the same thing. If they had their way, and if they could, they would shut all those little prisons down. You know, which all of us felt, discussed it, talked about it. Even we'd laugh sometimes after a few beers and say, "Let's go burn them down." That was our sentiments. We all agreed. See, it's so I don't know how to say it. Put it this way. I can tell you right now. 11035 92nd Street, Atonement Home. It's still operating. It used to be a prison before they turned it into an orphanage, they called it. I remember the term itself when we inquired, what does atonement mean? And we found it. Atonement, I remember one of the sisters, she come and told us, not a nun, an Indian sister. She was older than all of us. She come in with that word and she says atonement. Now, in the church, to atone is to atone for your sins, for what you've done wrong. One of the nuns told us, she said, atonement means that you're here because you're bad. You have to atone for being bad, for your sins. What sins did we commit? I came from paradise, a place of beauty. Not only I, but others. They talked about the beauty of the bush and every other place that they came from that was not in any way part of this system. They were true Indian people, and they were stolen. That's what we had in common. Now, understand, or getting people to understand that very concept, stolen. I had many arguments with people, which I just quit after a while. I was telling them that's what it is. It's out and out theft. When you take a child away from the mother, you're committing a crime, as I understand it today. But then it was acceptable. It was accepted because whatever they did in relation to programming to make the Indian world look undesirable, even that term Indian, I use it because it's the proper word. Not this Aboriginal, not this First Nation, none of that stuff. That's instituted by the government who suppressed all of us. I remain as an Indian, which means it comes from Los Indios, which means people without God. That's what they said about us, we're without God. So they tried to beat their God into our heads. Try to beat their God into us so that we would become obedient, slaves to a religion that's not of ours, not of our world. That was one of the toughest things. Because later on, I realized they were despiritualizing us. There was a process of despiritualization, taking us from our beauty, taking away our beauty, and replacing it with a programmed religion that was false. where when we got out, a lot of us, when we met after, I think a couple of brothers in particular, we used to go over this kind of stuff. And one of them said this. He said, my mom used to be in the church. It's when I got out and told her how they treated me, how everything went for all of us. She quit the church. She was a strong Catholic. He said, when I told my mom, we cried together because they wouldn't allow her to come and visit. They wouldn't allow her. Now, we find out later why. She said that he was taken away and his sister was taken away because she's a bad mother. That's why she wasn't allowed to go to the institute to see her children. Somebody reported her as being a bad mother and they were taken. So that's why, as you said, how does the other world feel about it? Well, it was the other world that got him taken away. It was the other world that got me and my sisters and brothers taken away. That's why I lost total connection with that other world in my mind. I tolerated it. I just tolerated it. No, to explain something now to the general public, people that are listening, that hatred is no longer within me because it damn near destroyed me. And I see it. I've seen it work on others. I've seen other the brothers who've been in there. I see it working on them. And to go back to this, I refer back to this commission of inquiry into what happened and everything. When I listen to some of those Indian people testify, they're right on target. They're not lying. And yet there's those who say, well, they could be lying. Now, where it come down to, how is this ever resolved? People my age, I don't have that in me other than the emotional part that I can deal with now. But when I was younger, I couldn't deal with it. I was so disoriented because of that upbringing. I couldn't function properly in a world that rejected us. I couldn't accept that world that rejected us. I couldn't accept that they're trying to force us into a world we don't belong. All my life, what was in my heart, at times at night in my mind, whether I was laying in prison or trying to beat that drug habit, trying to stay alone and leave drugs alone when I was younger, I still had in my mind that place of purity. And it was a total comfort for me to know I came from a place that's pure. And I wanted to be clean like that again. That's what kept me alive. Thinking of the purity of where I came from, not what I was forced to live. So if people could understand that, they'll begin to understand not so much what we experience. They'll understand what I'm saying. This has got to end. I don't care whether it's an institute or a family that's disoriented. Something has happened in their lifetime. Something has transpired in the past that makes them dysfunctional. I don't accuse people anymore of being a bad parent or this or that because I was. Not bad. I was not a parent. I wanted to be. But people have said this in testimony, and I didn't want to agree with it, but I think of even you, Aggie, you're my daughter when you're small. Your mother and I had our problems, but I could never tell her. I could never tell her what was bothering me. Hopefully she'll understand now, because she listened to this. And that separated me from, in relationships, your brothers and sisters in the mountains. It was still with me. I could never talk to their mother about it. I could never talk to anybody about it. It took a long time to reach this point where I could talk about it now. So where it's not that you become so, some might say, so hateful. It's not hate. I don't know how to describe it in English, but it's something to do with a feeling within inside of you. You know that you're good. You're good-hearted. You know that. But something says, as there that says, no, they won't accept you. They don't know you as you know you. They don't feel what you feel. They don't want to know about your problem. So when I look at it, I think of this concept of citizenship, how people give their allegiance to a government that's responsible for doing what they did to us. It's almost like we're not like you. No, I made that separation that they're not like us.
Yeah.
And I used to wonder about who are we? That's what they talk about today, the loss of identity. I
Yeah.
didn't lose an identity. They killed it, or they tried to kill it. The identity that I had and the other boys and the other brothers and sisters, they tried to kill that identity. Now it's openly said. They
Um,
say
I was just gonna add,
they quote an agent of Indian Affairs who once said, "Kill the Indian, save the man." Pretty interesting.
yeah, that's
That's
where it all started. Was from that thought and that mindset. But a lot of what you're talking about, like the emotions that you felt, no matter how much you knew you were a good person, you felt those that feeling inside of you. And what they would define that as today is trauma. And there's a lot of proof now, and I mean they prove it in their scientific ways, that even in childhood, if you experience trauma, if you are left in a state of living in fear day to day, that has long lasting effects until the day that you die, your whole life. It can affect you. It can affect your physical health, your mental health, your emotional, spiritual, every part of you. And that's what we see with our people. And even going back to when you were talking about your mother and your friend's mother, I really think about, like, that's the older generation that had to have their children taken from them.
yeah,
What did that do to them spiritually and mentally and emotionally, to have what you consider your whole life, your children taken from you, and there's not a single thing you can do no matter how hard you fight? What was that like for all of those parents? And what was it like for their children to come home? What did they come home to? There's damage that was done there.
yeah,
And yeah, that's just what it makes me think of. And even, ceremonies that I've gone to, they don't talk about, like trauma and healing the way that you read about it in, like, psychology. But there's so many things that our culture and our ways already know without ever having to do any kind of experiment or anything like that, or study. And I've seen people and heard that, when they're hurt as a grown woman, in ceremony, they'll want to, doctor her little girl spirit inside of her. And you see that with today's world, and psychiatrists and therapists and things like that. It's the same mindset, but our people, we already know those things without ever having to be the proof with
yeah,
studies and research and things like that. Like, I know that that's just how it is for us, and I have that understanding because of everything that you've taught me, in my life too, Dad. But yeah, just listening, I just wanted to say that much.
yeah. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Like you touch on things that, and you put it in a way that I accepted immediately. Uh, where, like I said, the hardest part being emotional. See, that's a hard thing for people today to understand. To going back way back then, when they don't have the experience, they haven't experienced. In other words, uh, it's like somebody telling you a story, and you're feeling it for the moment. You're feeling it, and if it's, and you know how I call it spelling. It's like casting a spell, whether you write it or whether you speak it. It's either good or it's not. When you talk about the atrocities that happened to you as a, and others as a people, a particular people, some people don't want to hear it. They think that's prejudicial. I'm serious. They make the division, not me or anybody else that suffered it. They're just trying to share what it is. But I think that a lot of people carry a guilt complex, or either that or they feel nothing. If they feel guilty, that's because somehow they understand, they know what's happened. And the guilt is, we're not, personally, I'm not trying to make people guilty of anything. I want to make people aware that this has happened. This is real. And I don't believe in compensation. You can't compensate or replace a disturbed emotional state that you experience as a child, and it carries on with you. That's hard to fix or even replace with, some kind of happiness that this world can give you. No, this can't be done. It's there, like you said. It's with me. Periodically, when I think of things, I try to think of the humor in it. I laugh at some of the things those nuns said and did, just to cover up the ugliness that I experienced among them. To turn it to humor, and I do it a lot because it's soothing. See, when people say they're a survivor, well, they are, but it's gone beyond survival. See, the perception of our people is that, what is that expression I just said? Los Indios. That's where Indian comes from. Indio. Los Indios, those without God. That's how we were treated, as if we had no spiritual content to us whatsoever. And we needed to be programmed with a God, or the concept of believing in a God. Where we had all these religious stories. Different priests would teach us this and that, how great these saints were, and so on and so forth. To me, that was like saying, you guys are not good enough. Look how holy and pious these people were. And they'd go on with a lot of their religious stories. They weren't encouraging. They weren't encouraging at all. Because I had to look at, and a lot of us discussed it quietly. We had to look at their character. I'll tell you his name right out now. Father John Telek attempted to rape me. That was our father confessor. We have to go and line up every Saturday before Sunday, the Lord's Day. Line up, go in there, and tell him our sins. Now, this guy is a pedophile. We all knew that. The humorous part of it is this. We'd get together and we decide we're going to go in there and we're going to tell a lie. So here we are, just kids. I'm 13 years old. There's four of us decided what we're going to do. We're going to go in there and tell the same lie. And the lie was, we saw this woman walking down the road near the boys' home. And she invited us to go and sleep with her in the bush. And we all did. That was our big lie. We didn't even know what we were talking about. But we had the idea of it. We're sinners. This is what we did. So I went in second time and I told the same story. Oh, the third one, Arthur, I should mention his name, but when he went in there, told the same story, all of a sudden that priest confessional box opened up and Arthur ran out there. He knew we were lying, but he wanted to hear our sins. Okay, let's give him some sins. What else could we do? What else could we, is it a sin for knocking a priest when he's playing hockey and that's all part of the game? That's when we got even. We were good hockey players.
But there was also that story.
We should get, that's how we got revenge. We'd knock them around.
On how you write that? Remember you told me about the Halloween story?
Oh, yes. That was a get even time. It was get even time. So here's how it went. Just after supper on Halloween day or Halloween night, right after supper, all the lights are turned off, even outside in the yard. All the lights in the building. And they're given a stick not too thick, but we're all given about the same size as thick. And we can track down the priests, and they can track us down. And you go ahead with that stick, and you just wail away. Now, when we hear a priest in the dark, twice it happened with me, when we heard that priest say, ow, or, yell out, we all headed right for that, and we swinging in the dark, and we'd hear him, oh, oh, oh. We were knocking him around. So it was get even time, just like on the ice. They couldn't skate worth a damn. They're all raised in California.
That's such an odd game. I mean, what
Also,
is
yeah, like, I just want to be like dark stick. Like, what did you call?
I don't know.
Also,
Well,
I very much feel like this is reminiscent of like when I was a kid, all I had was a length of rope and a barrel and a stick, and that's how I had fun.
yeah, this was their game. They called it, but it was great. Oh, some of us got beat on too. I never got hit. I was fortunate. I got away. He came close. I could hear him, his breath. I got away. But that was a time, and it was actually fun because we knew we could get him. And a lot of us decided that when we get one of them, make them yell. That the rest of us would get there and give it to them, and we did.
the
No,
best part was they didn't know who hit them.
pardon me.
I said the best part was didn't know who hit
Yeah, they
them.
had no idea. That's right. They had no idea. I was so happy the lights were off. That was the wonderful part about it. They had to take it, and we gave it to them best we could when we caught them.
I still can't get over like dark stick nighttime game. Like, a part of me is like, again, like,
Uh,
I'm sorry. Like it's.
they called it. Well, we played, and I could say this from what the stories we shared after, which fish we caught, we all share all that. We got them all. So we were better in the dark than they were. They're the ones that called it, right? They let out the conditions. We lived by them. We gave it to them. But it's one of the get even times as well as hockey. And we did it. Some of the best players, like for example, my brother, my older brother, late brother, he made NHL. So did another brother named Clark. He made NHL. He made Chicago. Was Stinsick. He made Chicago. Oh, I'm sorry, Boston Bruins. My brother was Detroit Red Wings. And he didn't stay. Then we met all the stars, Gordie Howe and all that. But he left. And I asked him why he flew to Vancouver. I was in Vancouver that time. Now, here's part of that upgrade. He said, it may be the NHL. They glorified it and everything else. But he says it doesn't pay worth a damn. That's why he left. He did 4 exhibition games and he found out what the pay was. There was no money in it. So he wasn't trying to be rich, but the money was just a minimum amount. That's how it was. Even some of the NHL players at that time, they'd tell you, they've talked about it openly on talk shows and said there was no money at that time. No. So he flew to Vancouver and he stayed with me. Here's an example. Bob was so good in hockey. I remember in the boys' home, he was the guy that they were afraid of, those priests. They were afraid of him because he could take that puck from one end of the ice down to the other. And if they got into the way, they got knocked out of the way. He was good. So was one of the other brothers who played with Bob. Now, that there, when I think back on it, that was Bob's way of getting even. And also, and he said it to me. We talked about it later at that time when he was in Vancouver. We were talking about this very thing. And he said, it was so much fun to see them slide on their face when I knocked them down. They couldn't stop it. But getting back to it, Bob became a success He was hired. Bud Poyle used to be part owner of the Edmonton Flyers. Made one phone call to North Carolina. Bob became a playing coach for North Carolina. 3 times the amount of money that NHL paid him. And he could pay off his bills, got a vehicle, and today, North Carolina has an NHL team. He was the first playing coach when he first started. And I think about that as, yeah, now that's a success story. Got nothing to do with, oh, he became a priest, he did this. No, that's not for us. But to talk about my brother, I feel so good about my late brother. For all the shit he been through as well, with me, always with me, beside me, always. He made it. You know? And we were told, like, they use that word degenerate. I never knew what it was. They call it degenerates. Later on, I looked it up in a dictionary. I'm not a degenerate. You know, look it up, you people. That's what we were referred to as. It's like we degenerated. Now, a lot of the words that you used on us, when you find out about them, it angered you because you're not like that. So I said earlier, I had to remind myself, I'm good. I know I'm good. My heart tells me I'm good. Yet they won't allow you to be good because they keep saying you're a degenerate. What did that priest say when he grabbed me by the hair? When he tried to tell us we should be done in an hour and we had about 5 hours ahead of us to do that work? And I told him straight out, I used the F word. F off. He grabbed me by the hair and he dragged me in the gravel. Dragging me. And the other boys came over to jump on him. Pulled harder. And he said to me that I had the devil in me, that I was evil. I knew I wasn't. That's what I mean. That's what brought it on.
Is that when you
reminding myself that I'm good. I'm not evil.
is that the time you had to cut like bad parts off of some fruit or something?
Yes.
A pile of fruit and you had to cut all the bad pieces out, right?
Yep. At that time, I recall we're doing bananas. We separate the spoiled part and keep the good part. And we had big vats full. And we still had about 10 boxes or so left. So I know we got a long ways to go. He said 1 hour. He said, you've been at it too long. That's when I just reacted. I hardly knew what that word was, but you hear the bigger boys use it. So I told him. And that's what did it. He called me. He said I was possessed by the devil and that I was evil. And after he left, and I combed my hair, a bunch of hair came out, and there was blood back of my head. So he tore a little bit of my scalp. Now, see, where I didn't seek revenge, I knew someday I'll beat them all. I'll be out of here. I'll be out of here. And I know a lot of us, we shared later, that's what they had in their mind. I got to survive this. I'll get out of here. Now, we can talk about how mean they were. We can talk about, and I can stay right to the point where they were possessed, not us. They were possessed to do the things that they did to us. Now, one of the reactions from one of the priests when confronted by the same brother that stopped him from beating that little boy that peed the bed, he says, you may not be punished right now as you should be. He told him. I was there when he was telling him. There was others there. He said, but in time, you're going to see that the devil possessed you and you're going to end up in prison and you're going to do this. He was condemning him in front of people. So all he did, I'll just say, he pushed him. That encouraged us. I didn't think of him as being bad pushing a priest. I saw that he's standing up for us because he did it for a little boy that peed the bed. And I know he'd do it again. And my brother was with him. There's a time when they were piling right on the ice, after get off the ice. And they're piling on one of the medium boys. I was at the time, medium. They were piling him to the priest. And my brother went in there, he still had his skates on. He just jumped off the ice and hit both of them. And all he says, oops, I couldn't stop. Well, they know he was bullshitting. He's one of the best skaters on the ice. But he did it. They didn't react. He left that kid alone. That's what it took sometimes, an action to stop them. Just like E did, brother Bob did. So slowly, it wasn't a respect. I don't know whether it was a fear, but they were very careful when the big boys were around. They were careful because they knew now that they're going to stand up for us, smaller guys. And I know that's what helped us a lot. So to me, that kind of resistance was necessary for its time, for what they did. And I'm so grateful.
Yeah, they're almost like heroes, of that time. Like if you think about when people talk about 9/11, they tell stories of the heroic acts that certain people did, or even during the Holocaust, they talk about small things that people did that made them like modern heroes, real life heroes, and
Yeah.
I talked about that with my mom, that there's got to be stories like that of residential school where you have young men and young women who act with courage and integrity and try to help each other and protect each other. I think those would be amazing stories to put together and just read.
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah. In my heart, I honor them. I honor late brother Bob, your uncle. I honor brother E. I just mentioned his letter of his first name. But they did that. That's the two I experienced. There's other times it happened with others, but no, they stood up for us. I just heard about it. I'm so happy that it happened. You know what? For a while, I felt we have a protection. I felt we got a protection because for a long time after all those incidents happened, when the big boys started to stand up, it was easier on us. They were very careful what they did around us after that. And it happened on the ice a couple of times. There was fights between priests, and they let it happen. They didn't pile on him. And that man, he was one of our relatives. I find out later when I met him on the street. He was related to us. We didn't know. But he stood up. And did he ever do good? We all watched it. And it wasn't a priest. He was a seminarian studying to be a priest. We used to have to call him brother. He used to pick on all of us. He finally went up against somebody who took him down, physically took him down, and was on top of him, and he was pounding him. I had felt nothing for that one I'm supposed to call brother. He was not a brother. He was mean to especially the little guys. Walk by, if their clothes weren't right or shirt wasn't done up, that's how he was. And I used to feel it every time he hurt the little guys. I just feel it. I didn't even want to look. A couple of times I felt like, oh, I just want to grab him, bite him on the leg, and just not let go. A lot of things came to my mind. And even at that, where at times in a dining room where everybody's assembled, in front of everybody, they would center some of these little guys out. They'd make them stand up there, and they start to tell them, "You're a pea hound. You pee the bed. You're not getting any visits." Going on in it, it's almost like a judge in a trial. They're saying, "You're bad. Here's what's going to happen to you. Here's your sentence." So some of them were denied visits by their parents. You know, that's the part I was talking about earlier. That's the emotional part. That's some things that people got to know. Just to not see your parents when they get a visit. I never did, other than my mom when she showed up at that first institution. We never got visits. They didn't know where we were, and they weren't allowed to know. That's something else, isn't it? Now, with my one sister found out. But these other ones I'm talking about, we felt what they're going through. Some of them cried after when there's going to be no visit from the parents. That's all the lifeline they had to the outside. That's all the love they had. receive from the parents is a visit. And they're denied because they pee the bed. No parental visit. To me, that's worse than the physical beatings. That's what I'm trying to explain to people. It's the emotional part that hurt the most. The beatings, I could handle that. Most of the other boys, we'd laugh at it later.
You know,
Other
Lester,
than the,
talking
go
right,
ahead.
like there's so much I want to unpack, and I think we can do that, you know, in the next time we speak, because we are winding down on time today. But you talk about how something that's really affecting me, and I don't know how to approach this, but you're talking about the small boys, the medium boys, and the big boys, and how everything was so compartmentalized, right? And it was so easy to categorize people and take away their humanity to overpower them. Because when you strip people of their humanity, you're not seen as an equal, you're not seen as a same being. And then that's why you have grown men who prey on children, you know, grown women who prey on children, because if you take away the humanity, they're not seen as even a being, right? And something I'd like, you know, to maybe kind of go into with our next session, because I think that's something, again, this isn't, you know, I know I can't be the only one that would have that inquiry, you know, as to your feelings on understanding that and understanding that experience. Because when I think when Native people see children, you know, we're raised in community, right? So there's no separation of age or even gender, really, when it comes to the community aspects. We have certain protocols for things, but I think that maybe these institutions, these prisons, as you call them, that was the goal, was to rob people of their humanity, to make them think that there's so much to this, like, you know, categorizing people with age, with size, that removes that familial bond, you know. And you
Yep.
say
Yes.
that there's children that didn't get to see their family, and you know that was taken away from them for wetting the bed or anything like that, but at least they had each other, you know. You all
Yes.
had each other, and that was
That's what we have.
to family. And that's something I'd really like to kind of go over a little bit more in the next session, if you're keen to that.
Yes. Oh, yes.
And not separating by age and size, but also skin tone. How the darker ones
Yes.
were removed, you know,
Yes.
at other schools.
Yes.
Somewhere
You're right.
else, the lighter skinned children were more likely to be wanted by, you know, families who are looking to adopt or buy children. So
Yep. Yep.
That's
Yeah,
something.
that's what we went through. That very experience, what you just described. And a lot of us, we shared that after, you know, where, you know, we laughed about things, but at the same time, we knew that what we're expressing to each other is real, what we experienced and what we shared. We realized we feel the same. It's almost like we feel the same for what happened. The biggest thing was, what do we do about this? Because we knew, you know, later, the idea of a crime that came from one of the brothers that we met without, you know, there's about 6 of us that time. We sat down, we were in a pub, of course, and he said, you know, there was crimes committed against us. How the hell did we address this crime? And he harped on that. After a while, someone said, what are you talking about? Who are we? What can we do? I realized now there's a lot we can do. And this is one way of doing it, is making the whole world, or as best we can in this world, make people aware of what we experience. Now, having said that, I now understand what that brother was talking about, because there was a crime that was committed. I don't want to go too far into it, but just recently finding these children's bodies buried all around these residential schools. Now you have people who are blinded, I mean blinded, that are spending a lot of money to go over and request that His Holiness the Pope come and apologize. I could not accept it. Apology comes from the Greek term apologia, which means, and I studied it. Check it out, you people that are listening. Apology means you are no. If I harm you, and I bring harm to your family, I committed some serious atrocities against your family, and then I come to you later and say, I apologize. If you accept my apology, then that puts the issue in a neutral position where it's never discussed anymore because I apologize. Okay? In other words, when I apologize and you accept, I'm no longer responsible for what I did to you and your family. That's from Greek apology. That comes from, I studied, you people want to check it out. It's Aristotle's topic of topics. That's the thought patterns that they instilled in people for their time. Intellectual thinking. You have a war, you just sit back and intellectualize, don't get involved. Intellectualize everything. That's what's going on even today, and they consider themselves the learned people of this world, the intellectuals. So I can trace a lot of it just by researching where does that kind of thinking come from. So this is part of what we went through. They weren't intellectuals. They were just mean people pretending to be smart. They weren't intellectuals. They were mean people, I believe, that were purposely sent because of the way that they are by nature. They can do mean things without feeling anything. So I have no sympathy for any of them whatsoever. And when I think about the apologia, no, we don't need anybody to kiss anybody's ring and say, I want you to apologize for committing mass murder, for your institution sentencing our people to death, which the church did. That's where you get the term Los Indios. In other words, they could kill all those who were Los Indios, who were without God. And that was all of us way back in the day. Well, it still continued. The Buddhist food is an example of it. It's a continuation. They tried to force their God upon us. The other way previously our ancestors were killed because they wouldn't change from believing Creator Great Spirit to a God. So that's, later on when I get older, I start to look at that. What was their ultimate purpose? Why were these people in particular, and I believe they were chosen to carry out what it is that the church ordered and what the government sanctioned? So like that Indian Affairs individual who was an agent, what he said, kill the Indian, keep the man. In other words, we can mold that man into being like us, thinking like us. But you got to kill that Indian first because he doesn't think like us. When I had a look at that, I thought, yeah, they've been doing that to us. They're still doing it.
Yeah.
Or attempting to. Still attempting to. So where I believe confrontation should take place, just like I said when we were kids, the confrontation did take place when my brother and he stood up and he said, you're not hurting these kids anymore. You're not hurting these little guys anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I had such a great respect for them today in my heart. I miss them both.
Yeah. I'm sure they're still watching over you, Dad, and, making sure that the path ahead of you is, a good one.
Yeah.
You do a really good job, Dad, of expressing yourself and giving us, a view of what your thought process was like at that young age, what it was like to process those emotions. I just really, really appreciate you, being so honest with all of that, and as difficult as it is, I think it's it's going to have a really good effect on anybody who listens to have a real good understanding of, you know, the mental, the emotional, the spiritual experience of, you know, all of that, going through those schools and seeing that kind of violence daily, living in fear daily. But I think there's a lot more that, you know, we can pick up on next time. I would like to hear, you know, the day that you left, what that was like, you know, those emotions. But maybe next week when we get together, you know, we can talk about that. We are at the end of our hour, so we have to close
Yeah.
up.
Good. Yep.
Thank you so much,
Well,
Lester, for all of your time and your words. Like I absolutely echo what Agnes said. You know, you are able to articulate things that bring people into the moment, and your openness to allow people to feel with you and experience it through your eyes and through your spirit is really it's really moving and wonderful to be a part of. So I'm so deeply grateful for your time again today and all the time you've given so far in sharing, because it's, I don't think there's a word in the English language for that, but I'm just, gratitude.
oh, I feel so good. Both of you make me feel so good to do this. You know, it's like I'm talking to my daughters.
Well, you are
Yeah,
talking to your daughter.
yeah, both my daughters. But you know, it's so wonderful because I feel good about it. I had kind of reservations about it to begin with. Aggie mentioned it to me, but I told her, yeah, let's do this. Uh, I reached a point in my life where I can finally acknowledge the goodness in people and why they want to do things like this. And when Aggie mentioned it, it didn't take long to agree. I knew this is the time, and I knew this is how to do it. This is how to present it. And I'm so glad to have met you, and we'll talk again. And I want you to know that I'm very grateful to you and Aggie, and I feel good inside of me to do this. Even though sometimes it kind of gets to that emotional point where I get a little angry, but it's not hatred. It's just it just hurts when I think back and talk about it. But I feel good to talk about it because it's got to be known, and people shouldn't hold back on something like this. You know, where in all of this, I look at what happened to the Jewish people. You know, they say 6 million. Well, what I do know, and this is scholars of the white world who can tell you, and they have said it, felt it. 100 million Indians were killed since they used the right of discovery in this country. 100 million. You know, when I think of that, it comforts me to think that my suffering is nothing compared to what our ancestors went through. 100 million that were killed. You know, and not so much, it doesn't hurt because I know that they're still alive. They merely changed worlds. But at the same time, I'm still on this earth. I am still attached emotionally. I'm still attached. And finally, this is, to me, this is the way to do things because I feel good to talk about it. At one time, I didn't even want to. I thought, no, it's not going to help. Just get over it, move on. I couldn't. I don't think anybody that I ever talked to, they couldn't move on. So even now, it's helped me. It's relieved me of so much just to talk to you two about it, and everybody else that's going to listen. I feel so good. And I thank you.
I'm proud of you, Dad.
Thank you, Lester. All right, we will reconvene next week. You know, same Zoom space, same Zoom
Yeah.
channel. And yeah, I hope you have a good rest of your week and visiting in Manitoba.
I'm here on a teaching venture. And I
That's-
like this kind of school. You come and go as we please.
I'd like that too.
Yeah.
All right, Lester and Agnes, thank you again so much. And I will see you all next week.
You will so.
All right,
See you, Ags.
friends.
Yeah.